Hello, shalom, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to UIA's webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Idan Goldberger, and in the last 4.5 years, I have the pleasure, privilege, and honor to be the Executive Director and Shaliach of the UIA in Melbourne, alongside two other great shlichim, Adi Peleg from Perth and Jasmine Malul from Sydney. They are both with us tonight. I would like to acknowledge two people who are here with us tonight as well. Keren Hayesod's Regional Manager for Australia, Adi Geffen Adler, who joins us from Jerusalem in Israel, and Yair Miller, OAM, our Federal CEO, who joins us from Sydney. I am very excited to open this webinar as this is our first online event that we are hosting from Melbourne. We have a big crowd tonight, mostly from Australia, from 4 different states, but also surprisingly from 13 other countries. So thank you again for coming tonight or this morning for some of us. This session is recorded and will be available upon request, and we will send you tomorrow an email with all the details. Some housekeeping I'll share with you now. Right. I believe that most of us know how to use, hang on. I believe that most of us are aware of how Zoom is working. But if you're not familiar, on your screen, you have 3 buttons: Q&A, chat, and raise your hand. Please use the Q&A to ask Dr. Tsuk questions. We are a big crowd tonight, and we will do our best to attend your questions, but please bear with us as we are conscious of time and we might not be able to answer everyone's questions. However, as I said, we will send you tomorrow Nir's details so you can stay in touch with him directly. The chat gives you the option to write a comment to all participants or just to one specific person. And by raising your hand, you can signal us that our attention is required. The session will take about 50 minutes. Nir will speak for about 30 minutes, followed by 20 minutes for your questions and answers, and his answers. In case, as I said, you want to stay in touch with Nir, we will send you tomorrow all the details. I would like to acknowledge the people who worked with us in the past few weeks and made this event possible. They are all working now in the background, but I really wanted to thank Jenna Unger from Sydney and Lisa Silver and Jenny Borstein from Melbourne for all their hard work. As you probably know, the UIA, which is the official fundraising arm of the State of Israel, is celebrating 100 years this year, supporting Israel's national priorities. Supporting Holocaust survivors, new immigrant, youth at risk, and many others in the Israeli society is always important, but even more so during times of crisis. While it's important to support others in good times, helping others in times of crisis is noble. This is the time to show we care. This is the time to take care of the weakest link in our society and in our nation. This is the time to say to the people of Israel, you are not alone and we are here for you. So if you haven't made your donation to the UIA, please do it before the end of financial year. Just call your local UIA office, call your favorite shaliach or any UIA staff or executive member, or go online to uiaaustralia.org.au. And for whatever you will do, I would like to say Toda Rabba. Now, I would like to ask Hayley Southwick, President of UIA Victoria, to welcome us and present our speaker, Dr. Tsuk. Hayley?
Thank you so much, Idan. Hi, everybody. Firstly, can I say, how wonderful it is to be with you all here this evening for this webinar. As Idan said, my name is Hayley Southwick, and I am the president of the UIA campaign here in Victoria, Australia. On behalf of the leadership here in Australia, I just want to wish you all the best during these very difficult times. And I want to say a real personal and from the bottom of my heart, a really big thank you because our UIA family has just been so generous over these difficult times. And I really want to say a big thank you. The needs of the projects and the causes that Keren Hayesod UIA supports in Israel, those needs haven't diminished over the crisis. In fact, they've just increased. And thank you to our supporters and our donors for sticking with us and being part of our UIA family. This is the first webinar, as Idan said, that has generated out of Victoria, and I'm really hoping that it all works well, because I see it as something, a tool that we can use going forward. It's a great way, even after, even post-COVID. It's really a way that we can come together and bring fabulous speakers from all around the world and really connect Israel and our family in Israel with our UIA family here in Australia. So it is our inaugural event this evening, and we have a fabulous speaker to start our series of webinars. So if you just indulge me for a couple more minutes, and I'll give you a bit of a rundown of Nir's CV. It's very impressive. But Dr. Tsuk is a seasoned practitioner, academic and facilitator with over 20 years of international experience in the fields of social capital, entrepreneurship, impact and culture of innovation. Serving as NYU's Global Distinguished Scholar, as well as a visiting professor of entrepreneurship at Osaka University, Japan. Nir has recently launched for New York University the Institute for Impact and Entrepreneurship, connecting New York and Tel Aviv and bringing the language of innovations to those who need it most. Nir holds a PhD from Cambridge University in Social and Political Sciences, where he wrote his dissertation on social networks, social capital, and intentional communities. Previously, Nir led policy research initiatives at the Community Development Foundation in London and at the Committee for Social Affairs in the Israeli Parliament in Jerusalem. Prior to this, Nir helped Idealist.org, the world's largest social online talent acquisition platform, to increase its size and impact as its head of growth, and has brought Ashoka, the world's largest social entrepreneurship organization, to Israel after serving as Ashoka's global fellow director in Washington, D.C., connecting more than 3,000 social entrepreneurs in 72 countries. Now, this resume goes on. Nir was a curriculum developer at the Rabin Center, the Israeli National Authority for Holocaust Remembrance, the editor of Israel's best-selling computer magazine, a restaurant manager, and it even says here a street cleaner. So I'm very interested to hear more from Dr. Nir Tsuk. It is my pleasure to welcome him, and thank you all once again for being with us.
Well, thank you, Hayley. Can you hear me all? Loud and clear, fantastic. But for some reason I can't see myself on the screen.
We can see you perfectly well.
Fantastic. How bizarre. Well, thank you. This is wonderful. I mean, after this such kind of an introduction, I can just retire. I mean, I can say goodbye and enjoy all the compliments. Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Idan, for having me. It's an honor. I'm happy to be your first speaker. I've been a fan of Keren Hayesod in general, and Keren Hayesod in Melbourne for quite some time. I've visited Australia 3 times now. Always happy to come back. I mean, this time virtually, but soon, I hope. I mean, do we know when the flights will be resumed? Not yet. I'm happy to be here. And I think what I'll do now, the whole thing is a bit funny because I'll be talking to myself for 30 minutes without seeing anyone, just Idan. So bear with me. This is one of those little innovations of times of Corona. What I'll do now, I'll share my screen, assuming I know how to do it. I think I know how to do it. I think I am doing it. And you can see my screen, right? Fantastic. So yeah, I'm a great believer in planning, and you know, especially in times of crisis, especially here, especially now. What I would like to say as a first statement is, please plan and do not panic. We thought that it would be good for me to talk about innovation in times of crisis. We talk about COVID or Corona or whatever you want to call it, coronavirus, but my argument is a bit wider. I want to say that innovation takes a special role during times of crisis. Crisis could be financial, could be military, can be healthcare one. And I will try to build a case in the next 30 minutes. You know, I've been told that a wonderful way to do these things is to make sure I tell you before I say what I'm going to say, then say it, and then make sure I recap. So what I would like to talk about today, and again, 30 minutes is not a lot, but I'll try to do my best, is to say something about the language of innovation. And since it's a language, to give you a very basic vocabulary about innovation for beginners. Then I'll try to say what's special about innovation in times of crisis. Before that, I will say, what does this time of crisis constitute? What makes the whole thing so crazy? Then I would like to say how this thing is relevant to you. And I'll try to give you briefly 3 helpful tools to think about innovation in your surroundings, in your house, in your business, in your organization. And then I'll take some questions. And again, I would like to say that this crisis is fascinating. First of all, it's fascinating because it touches all of us. And before talking about innovation, I want to make sure that all of you are healthy and sane and your people are with you. It's a physical crisis, it's a mental crisis, it's a financial crisis, international crisis. And I think innovation has a lot to do, or the theory of innovation has a lot to say about it. Now, in the past few decades, you know, entrepreneurship and innovation has been the flavor of the month. You know, people talk about it all the time. People teach it, people use it almost too often. And I think we need to pause and say what innovation is, or entrepreneurship is, and what it is not. The way I see it in the past 20 years, it's no longer a topic or a subject or a field. It's a mindset. It's a way of seeing the world. It's almost kind of glasses which you put in order to see things differently. And I think this should not be taught only at business schools and should not refer only to startups and technology, but all fields of life. And that's exactly why I launched my Institute for Impact and Entrepreneurship, teaching entrepreneurship to trafficking survivors, to teachers, to social workers, to high school kids, and to the elderly. And when we talk about the language of innovation, I want to take you back. I hope some of you are old enough, or old as I am, to remember when the internet was invented, something like, what, I would say 20, 30 years ago. You remember in the mid-90s when the internet was invented or discovered or developed, there were courses helping people to learn the language of the internet, right? There were workshops, there were courses in which people learned what is a website and what is a link and what is a browser. People paid good money in order to learn all these things. I mean, we can laugh about it now because it's funny to go and pay money to learn how to surf. However, people who don't speak the language of internet nowadays kind of get lost. And I'll give you an example of my parents, and I think my parents are here with us this evening. Hello, Mom and Dad. They are wonderful. First of all, I'm happy and proud to have them as my parents. I hope I chose well. They are wonderful travelers. They're avid travelers. And when they travel, they still travel with the books, right? Lonely Planet or Baedeker or whatever. Now, the problem with those books is if you land in Berlin and you would like to take a train to Hamburg, the timetable is not here. You will have to go online, otherwise you'll get lost. So knowing the language of the internet, which my parents are on the way of mastering, is crucial. I would like to argue that now in the 21st century, knowing something about the language of innovation is as crucial. You don't have to be an entrepreneur yourself, but you have to have a certain kind of a vocabulary, something like the first 100 words in entrepreneurship in order to survive, in order to manage, and in order to thrive. And I think that we will start, and I'll give you part of the vocabulary and then move, as I said before, to crisis and innovation during crisis. I think the main basic words are innovation, entrepreneurship, and disruption. As you see on the slide, it starts with innovation, which is the less dramatic one. The middle one is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is doing new things or creating new solutions to problems. And disruption is the holy grail of innovation in normal times. In normal times, you want to disrupt your industry. You want to change everything and make the old things completely irrelevant. To emphasize what I said, the difference between adaptive is improving, and disruptive or transformational is disrupting things completely. So when we think about the holy grail of entrepreneurship in normal times, these are, and you probably know all the logos, and if you know all the logos still, you have the names underneath. These are 4 disruptive innovations which changed everything. The first one, without the logo, is the Gutenberg's printing press, which changed literally everything. And following that, Apple did that with the iPhone, but also with iTunes. Amazon did that to retail, and Tesla did that to cars. And again, when you think about those companies, their fields or these innovations, their fields have not been the same after they came to be. Another important element in the language of entrepreneurship is the importance of failure, the importance of risk-taking, and the importance of learning. Someone said before, sometimes I win and sometimes I learn. The importance of failing fast is crucial, because failure teaches you what to do and what not to do, teaches you whether you fit for the game or not, and helps you to reshape, recalculate, re-navigate, and move on. Another very important thing in our field of innovation is the art of combination. I mean, I hope you'll forgive my sense of humor. I like all these cartoons. But the basic idea is that you take 2 things which are completely irrelevant to each other or unconnected, and by combining the 2, you create something new. And we'll have some example of that in a few minutes. Another important thing is the shape of change or the direction of change. Change can come in a top-down way. And again, the top can be government or CEO or headmaster of school or whatever, or bottom-up, in which people underneath understand that there is a problem. They know what the problem is. They know what the solution is, and they create something new that is being adopted and brought up. I would like to argue that the second one, the bottom-up one, is the more organic, the more important one, which happens during times of crisis. Another important thing, as we talk about mindset, is about hopes as opposed to fear. You know, someone said that pessimists have problems to any solutions you give. The importance of thinking positively is great in normal times, even more so in Corona time, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the last thing I want to spend time on, and again, I'm touching upon all these things very briefly. I'm happy to talk about all these things later. If you give me a call, send me an email or a pigeon or a smoke signal. I want to talk about the difference between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. Intrapreneurship is basically doing entrepreneurship inside an existing organization, right? Instead of creating a new startup, a new structure, a new mechanism, you say there are enough existing structures. If we only change the DNA, if we only take this creative energy, we take this tool set and change existing organization from the inside, the world will be a better place. I would like to argue that in times of crisis, intrapreneurship is much more important and much more effective than entrepreneurship. You don't create new startups, you take new ideas and change existing institutions, as I will show in a minute in my examples. Even before that, some wonderful examples of intrapreneurship. You're probably familiar with this logo. This is Google's Gmail, which started as an internal mail service for the workers of Google until they realized the whole thing works fantastically well, and they brought it out to the world. And again, it started as an initiative of one of the workers, It was not part of the core business. It was not part of their main line of service. However, after realizing it works, they said, why not? And this why not is now changing the world. I mean, you know, Google reads all your emails on a daily basis and send you all these commercials, but we're not here to talk about that now. Another good example, you know, Haley mentioned the fact that I spent almost a month a year in Japan. Sony PlayStation. Sony's line of business had nothing to do with PlayStation. However, one of the employees' daughters had a Nintendo. I think it's called PlayStation as well, or something similar. And she asked her father, why doesn't Sony do something like that? And the rest is history. I think today Sony is bigger, better, faster, and I think cheaper than Nintendo. And again, the employee came to his bosses. They were clever enough or brave enough or desperate enough or apathetic enough to say, why not? And the rest is history. Last example I'll bring from here, from Tel Aviv. I don't know if you saw these little things. These are beach libraries. And again, this is not rocket science. They not change the world completely, but they solve two interesting problems which might be relevant for Australia as well. One thing is that, you know, when you go to the beach, beaches and smartphones do not go well together. Something about water and sand and all that stuff. That's problem number one. Again, not the biggest problem ever, and yet the other problem is, I don't know if you know people, and I don't know if it exists in Australia. I haven't seen it when I visited in December, but people throw away books. And people are kind enough or respectful enough not to throw them to garbage or recycle, but to put them on the sidewalks. And then you go around Tel Aviv and you see benches with books nobody needs. One of the workers of the Tel Aviv municipality, which is my city, and I love being here, said, why? We should probably connect the two. Collect all the books from the streets, put them on the beach, and the rest is history. Now this thing is being replicated by, I think, 5 different municipalities in Israel. And now you no longer have beach library, but also park libraries, boulevard libraries, etc., etc., etc. We talked about innovation, but I want to talk about the crisis for a second. I want to push the reset button, or even if I don't want to push the reset button, someone in Wuhan, be it a bat or a pangolin or a scientist or who cares or who knows, push the reset button. And we're going through a crisis which I'm 47, I do not remember anything like that before. And I'd like to portray or emphasize several aspects or dimensions of this crisis. First of all, this uncertainty is unprecedented, right? Someone said, the normal is strange and the strange is normal. The level of uncertainty is so great that, you know, we don't know what will happen. We don't know what to do, and we do not know what we do not know. Will I be able to travel? You know, I travel to New York at least once a month. When will be my next trip? I have no clue. When will I be able to see my parents in person and touch them? I don't know. So the level of uncertainty is so deep, is so disruptive that it changes everything. Another thing is, you know, distance is back. And again, forgive me for using beautiful American art to make my point, but issues like personal healthcare and personal space are being redefined. And again, all of a sudden, all the fundamental constants are changing in front of our eyes, and the whole reality is being reshaped, whether we like it or not. Sometimes, probably we not. And again, I don't know what you think about this person, and I try as hard as I can not to get into politics, especially when I talk to people I don't know or people I don't see. However, in various parts of the world, you see this severe, deep, wide lack of leadership. In times in which the government is important, you see presidents, prime minister doing the wrong things or taking their time or doing too little, too slow. And this again shakes our existence to the core. Talking about governments, and this is, you know, I'm talking about the government of Italy, but I can talk about my government and the American government, and to a certain extent, the British government and even the German government, we see some levels of underperformance. And you know, there is an interesting social contract between the citizen and the state, right? I will give you my money and some of my freedom, and you will protect me. Now, we thought that it's from a military attack, but now we realize that this protection should take care of my healthcare, and maybe a new kind of social contract is needed. Another little thing we realize is that everything goes online. I mean, this is a wonderful example, right? I used to go around the world. When people ask me, what is my business? I say, I travel the world and give workshops. The two parts of the sentence become completely irrelevant, right? Traveling the world is impossible, and giving workshops, at least in the way I used to do, by talking to people and touching them and looking at them, is impossible. Everything is happening online, in a good way, in a bad way, in a way that changes our life, in a way that it's too early to assess. And we will talk about it in a second. Another interesting thing, and this is many people say that this is the first pandemic that happens in times of social media and information overload. We almost know too much, and it's funny because you can feel exposed and anxious and determined and overflown at the same time. I mean, the joke about the little cartoon I put here refers to the too much information we get on Facebook. But if you spend too much time in front of your TV, you get crazy. The trick is how to stay informed without getting obsessed. But this information overload, more often than not, doesn't help. It actually disturbs. And it disturbs because it creates a deep sense of anxiety. I didn't want to bother you with too many slides, but if you look at the definition of anxiety, anxiety is the feeling that the things you used to know and do are no longer relevant, and you feel lost. This is exactly what happens now. And the levels of anxiety are so deep and so natural that I would like to argue that it's absolutely normal and healthy to feel anxious, because people who don't feel anxious at this kind of situation, something is wrong with them, and probably not in an admirable way. If this is the time, and these are the necessities, I would like to go back to Plato. I'm a political scientist by nature, or by training. What's nature? And Plato said before that necessity is the mother of innovation, or the father of innovation, or the sister, or the goddess of innovation. And what we see in this situation, more and more people who didn't think that they have any entrepreneurial bone in the body create new things, new solutions to old problems, create systemic social change because they have to, because they need to. And I want to say, and that's the core argument, if you want to take one thing from this session, is this, that innovation in times of crisis is very different than innovation in peacetime. If we talk about innovation in peacetime, about disruption, here, we don't need disruption anymore. Everything is being disrupted. Everything is being disrupted. My routine, the way I shop, the way I work, the way I talk, the way everything. So innovation, if the innovation will be disruptive, it will be too much. We need adaptive innovation. The innovation, because the crisis is so deep, the innovation tries to be reactive. The innovation tries to be evolutionary and incremental. The innovation or entrepreneurship are bottom up. People see something, they realize it's worked for them, they share it with other people, and all of a sudden you see other people in their neighborhood, and then in their country, and then in their world doing something like that. I would also like to argue that innovation happens in an agile way. You try, it works, fantastic. It doesn't work, you try again because you have to. Moving quickly and adapting yourself is key. As I said before, I think intrapreneurial is much more important in this era. And the last thing, which is part of the language of innovation, the importance of MVP, minimal viable product. You try something, it works. It shouldn't be the best design. It shouldn't be the most beautiful one. You try, it works, you improve as you run. And I want to give you some examples because it goes all these things: adaptive innovation, reactive, evolutionary, bottom up, agile, Entrepreneurial and MVP work in so many ways, in such a beautiful way, that I'm almost tempted to say that this crisis makes me optimistic. However, you know, thousands of people are dying, and I'm not sure this price is worthy. First of all, in terms of language of innovation, and I'm a big fan of humor. I mean, I guess all of you have received hundreds of memes and hundreds of jokes about the situation. And the beautiful thing about the human mind, or human values, or human nature, humor helps us to cope with the situation. Humor helps us to explain the unexplainable. And we see phenomenal, you know, morbid sense of humor, community sense of humor. I think the level of innovation I see in humor is unprecedented, but I might be wrong. It changes relationship. These are my parents. Ehud is my father and Mimi is my mother. It was my mother's birthday 2 weeks ago. Now, of course, because of COVID-19 or Corona or the virus or the pandemic, I could not see them. So what we did, they live in a nice house in the north of Tel Aviv. We sent them balloons, we sent them goodies, and the three brothers, myself, Gil, Tal, and myself, stood in the street, waved at them, and sang at them. Is this ideal? No. Is this an adaptive kind of innovation? I would like to say so. Do I like this? Do I want this innovation to last? Probably not. But we try to do what we can. Another good example, and you saw that all around the world, are hobbies. You see people singing, you see choirs, you see people doing cheers across balconies. And again, this is another victory of the human spirit that does what it can and take the existing situation, makes the most, and improvise and improve. Likewise, I don't know if Saturday Night Live is as big in Australia as it is in the US, and to a certain extent in Israel. You know, this comedy show runs for the last, I think, 30 years in the US, in front of live audience, being recorded weekly. What live audience? What are you talking about? Now they do a Saturday Night Live at home, in which the various comedians are recording themselves, and someone from his home editing video equipment is putting everything together. And the beautiful thing about it is that the result is as funny and as pleasing, as entertaining as the live one. Following that, you know, some people would like to argue that Jews are early adapters, or, you know, one of the favorite jokes I know about Jews is just that Jews are like everybody else, but more so. So I would like to say that Jews are more adaptive, and I don't know if you've seen that, but similar to Saturday Night Live, from home, there was a Saturday Night Seder in which hundreds of people joined on Zoom and did something online in a way in which takes the tradition and reshape and reimagined it. If innovation is creating new solutions to old problems or new problems, this is innovation at its best. Retail as well. And again, we see the boom of online. I say, talking about my parents all the time, right? As a good Jewish boy, I should mention my mother at least twice an hour. I think my mother started doing shopping online a week ago, because until then, she wanted to go to the market and touch her tomatoes and make sure that the vegetables are to her liking. Now, necessity is the mother of innovation, and my mother shops online. Farmers realize that they can no longer do things with the supermarkets, so they start doing things on their own. Restaurants doing delivery for the first time. I've even read about a wonderful winery here in Israel, the winery of Dalton. They can no longer receive visitors at the visitor centers, so they ship wine tasting kits to people online. You can buy a wine tasting kit, and to do in your lockdown, in your seclusion, your own wine tasting with instruction. If this is not entrepreneurship, I don't know what it is. Another interesting definition of entrepreneurship is, you know the cliche about not giving people fish, but teaching them how to fish. Entrepreneurship is not giving people fish, not teaching how to fish, but changing the fishing industry. And to a certain extent, what the farmers here do, I guess in Israel and in other parts of the world as well, is changing the fishing industry, or changing the agriculture industry, or changing the retail industry. Speaking of industry, and speaking of my family, my brother Gil is the sales director of S.C.A.M.P.E.R, the car company here in Israel. And this is a wonderful innovation they did. This is one of the factories of the cars back in Spain. They no longer produce cars, they produce ventilators. And it took them something like 2 weeks to realize cars are not necessarily needed now. Ventilators are needed. How can we do it? So they took one of the small engines from the car. I think it was the vishers, right? The windshield. Is that how we call it in English?
Wipers.
Wipers. Thank you, Idan. Good to have you with us. And thanks again for the invitation. Maybe I should move to Hebrew and do everything. It's going to be easier. The wipers. Yeah, they took the engines of the wipers, and now these are the engines of the ventilators. Innovation at its best. It took them something like 2 weeks to convert the assembly line, and now S.C.A.M.P.E.R is producing ventilators. They're not the most beautiful ventilators. They're not the most beautifully designed ventilators, but they work. They get the work done. And the industry realized they need now ventilators, not cars. Talking about the healthcare business, many people say that the field of telemedicine is now doing a quantum leap, right? Decades were covered now with all the developments. This is not exactly e-medicine or telemedicine or e-healthcare, but this is a lovely, lovely, necessary innovation created here. This is a corona testing position that was created by one of the healthcare insurers here in Israel. And you see more and more people create new solutions to problems in terms of healthcare and doing it from a distance. The last thing I want to talk about is government. On one hand, we see governments malfunctioning. On the other hand, we see how governments are more important than ever. Do you think governments are important or not? It doesn't matter anymore because they play such a crucial role in your life. And they will play even more so when the healthcare crisis is turning into economic crisis. And we see how governments are changing quickly. This is very similar, the way in which government is changing, to what happens in war. And I think the best equivalent to what happens now is innovation during war. Best example, and again, I don't have to tell Aussies or other people in other parts of the world, World War II was one of the most horrendous calamities and catastrophes in human history, but it was really one of the most fertile mothers of innovation, right? Instead of building pots, tanks were manufactured, V2, airplanes. Also social change owes a lot to World War II. Social change in terms of feminism, in terms of equal rights to minorities. War is changing everything, thanks to government, thanks to necessity, and then innovation that follows war usually stays with us. I would like to argue that it's too early to say what will be the outcome of coronavirus, but we already see changes in the way family is structured, changes in the way workplace is structured, changes in the way education is structured. It's definitely also the age of collaboration. More and more people are willing to collaborate with others. This is a wonderful example. Governments with the private sector, etc., etc., etc. I'm running out of time, so I will jump quickly to how all this is relevant to you. I want to give you 3 tools which changed my life, because people think, oh, innovation, you have to think out of the box, you have to be creative. Yes. However, if you follow some procedures, if you have the right kind of scaffoldings, you can do innovation without being entrepreneur, or learning how to be entrepreneur by following very simple rules. The first one, and again, I'm touching upon them. I'm happy to talk about all these things later and to do it online. And you can Google all these things, and I can share the presentation with you. One is Lean Canvas, which forces you to think systematically and shortly, succinctly about what is your problem, What is your problem? What is the real problem you're trying to solve? What are other people's solutions? What is your solution? How do you measure it? What makes you the best person to sell this solution to people? How are you going to sell it to them? Who are the people? How much it's going to cost you? And how much you're going to bring money in? The beautiful thing about it, you look at it and you say, duh, what's the big deal? But to a certain extent, if you do the lean canvas well, if you define your problem well and go through all these steps, you can save hours and days and pages of business plan. You remember the time in which business plans were numbers of pages? Now you can show people. People can be investors, can be clients, can be partners, can be potential employees. The lean canvas you created for your problem. And as you keep on solving, you can refine and reshape and sharpen it. I use it all the time for almost any problem I have. When I established the Institute for Impact and Entrepreneurship at NYU, I asked myself, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? Do I really understand the problem? Is it a real problem? Is there a real market? Who are the clients, etc., etc., etc. And again, apologies for being so short, but webinars, most of you have already lost your attention, and doing these things for longer than an hour is an online suicide. A second tool which I find exceptionally helpful is S.C.A.M.P.E.R. And S.C.A.M.P.E.R tells you what to do with your product or your service. Maybe you can substitute something and make a difference. Maybe you can combine something and make a difference. Maybe you can adapt and create a new thing, right? You remember the slide of the snake and the pig creating the dinosaur. Maybe you can modify in various ways, maximize, minimize, and other ways, modify your service or your product in order to do new things. Maybe you can take the same thing and put it into another use. One of the best stories in Viagra. Viagra was created for blood pressure, and now we all know what it does. Eliminate. Maybe by eliminating something, you can create a new product. If you take the bicycle and make the wheels irrelevant, you have the gym bicycles which do similar thing but in a very different way. The last technique is reverse, and again, I'm happy to during Q&A take some examples from you and show you how going through those options you can reinvent, reimagine, renovate a product, a business, a service. The last one, which you're probably most familiar with, is design thinking, which is a method created by the Stanford School of Design, which forces you to empathize with your client, really understand him or her or they, to define which one of the problems, because all your clients have many problems. Solving all your problems to all your clients is utopian and impossible. Tell me who the client is. Make sure that you define one problem, then do a brainstorming in order to think about the craziest, most creative, most silly ideas to solve this one problem to this one segment. Then choose the one which is the most viable, sustainable, and would sell. Create a prototype, quick, MVP, minimal viable product. Test it, see if it works, and then go backwards. Running and defining. These are the three tools. I'm happy to talk about them later. But I want to say that I think that those tools could help us to what people call navigate the new normal. And there's a list of 7 that could help us to navigate the new normal. First of all, relaxing is important, right? Anxiety is natural, is almost healthy, but it might be time to move on. We need to resolve. We need to think more and more about remote, doing things from a distance. The distance is back. Resilience is more important than ever. When trying to return to normal, we're trying to think how to reimagine our business, reimagine our relationships, reimagine Keren Isod, reimagining NYU, and reform the way we think, the way we behave, the way we consume. Now, that's another little joke that I saw in one of McKinsey's recent reports. You know, the future is not what it used to be. And there are several scenarios in which there's going to be a gradual recovery. You know, we hit the ground and jump. There's going to be a brutal recovery in which it's going to look like a W. There's going to be a global slowdown, and then reemergence, or the red one, the dramatic and sad one. There's going to be a long recession in which systems will collapse and it will look like an L shape. That's basically it. So to recap and try to make sure I at least understand what I was saying, we started with innovation. We said that innovation is a language. It's not a topic. It's not a field. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of thinking and acting. I try to give you some words. I try to, the key building blocks or phrases in innovation for beginners. I try to define what's special or not special in this crisis and gave some dimensions. If you remember, unpreparedness and lack of leadership and uncertainty and anxiety. Then I talked about the way in which innovation in times of crisis is different. It's more incremental, it's more entrepreneurial, it's more bottom up, it's more reactive, it's more adaptive. I gave you very briefly some tools that you can use tomorrow or in a minute in order to change your life or change your reality or do something fun. And now I'm happy to shut up for at least a minute and take some questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nir, very, very much. That was insightful and interesting. While we gather people's questions, please go ahead and write your question. Just press the Q&A button and type your question. We already have one question, and we'll start with this. You come from the world of academy. Many of our viewers come from world of academy as well. How does COVID-19 crisis impact academy at the moment?
Now, I promise people I will shut up for a minute. It might be shorter.
I can ask it in a longer way if you want.
Backwards, in Hebrew, in Braille. Thank you for asking. I think it's an important question because academia, I think academia is one of the most important institutions in our society. I say it because I'm part of it, but I'm one of, I think I have a lot of critique. I have things to say against academia, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Academia is one of the most richest institutions in our society. It has the best real estate in our cities, right? Melbourne, Tel Aviv, Cambridge, New York. You know, in NYU is the largest private owner of property in Manhattan. Crazy and wonderful. Universities have a lot of resources, tuition fee, grants, government, and all that stuff. It has a lot of clever people, or at least a lot of insights, information, and experience. And it has the most incredible resource ever. Every year, thousands of young kids come to us and say, take our time, take our brain, and do with it whatever you want. To use all these resources to teach only political science, to use all these resources to teach only law or engineering is a crime against humanity, is a crime against the students. I really believe in it. And the role of academia, you know, academia started back in Cambridge as a community of scholars. Then they added research. Then they said, let's make it apply and help the industry. Now it's about closing the gap between town and gown, between academia and society. And we see what happens now during COVID in the healthcare business. It happens also in the education business. I think academia will have to change itself, not only online, offline, but to take much more care about social change. Otherwise, academia as well will become obsolete.
All right. Next question we have from Russell. Have you got some examples of innovation or entrepreneurship in the welfare or social service field?
Many, and again, the things I don't cover now, I'm happy to discuss later. You have my email address. Please get in touch. One wonderful example in Israel about social change. There's an organization called Door to Door. Door to door in English, you know what it means? Door to door in Hebrew means generation to generation. Young people do delivery to old people who cannot leave their house. Again, not rocket science. The whole thing was created within a day via someone's phone. It changes reality of old people. It changes reality of young people. If this is not changing the fishing industry, what is? Simple. And it can be easily, I think it's already replicated in other countries. Another example is the Weizmann Institute using its medical experience, ability, and network to run surveys between people and enabling an early detection of corona before other people can do it. Again, bottom up, nobody was asked them, but then when the Ministry of Health in Israel realized how clever and simple, right, important is simple, how MVP, minimal viable product of Weizmann was successful in a bottom-up way, the Ministry of Healthcare co-opted and took it and spread it further. I hope I'm answering your question, Russell.
That's great. We have a great question from an anonymous attendee. A lot of innovation is happening now. What can we do to prevent change fatigue and help us to keep adapting to change?
Ooh, who is this? Who is this anonymous? Wow. My short answer would be I don't really know. And my longer answer would be I don't really know, but I have some ideas. I have some guesses. First of all, there's fatigue from everything. I suffer from a Zoom fatigue, right? I spend too many hours during the day in front of Zoom, but as long as it serves a necessity, I will do it. I think the only thing that changes, that continues, the only constant is the accelerating pace of change. And I would like to say, Mr. Anonymous or Ms. Anonymous, I think if you look at history, and now we are time in which we can think about the plague, Black Death, medieval Europe. If you look at successful societies or groups of people, and you think what made them successful, and it could be a nation, it could be a country, it could be a company, university, whatever, it's about the amount of change makers within it. People who say, let's take a step back, see some patterns and say, it shouldn't be like that. It ain't necessarily so. We should reinvent. This could be exhausting. Not all of us have to change everything all the time. I mean, to a certain extent, I would like to argue that in Israel, our little startup nation, we took the innovation revolution almost too far, right? The joke I tell people is that in Tel Aviv, every 12-year-old kid is the founder, CEO, president, chairman of the board, and sole employee of a startup which changes something that exists only in the boy's head, had no product, but has funding. You don't have to change all the time, but you have to be aware of adaptation. And that's why adaptation, not disruption, adaptation is crucial. Otherwise, you'll be out of market. So fatigue or not, it's like, how can you prevent fatigue, real fatigue in human life? You try to sleep, you try to be active, you try to adapt. I think that's same here. It's difficult, but the option is more dangerous and more difficult. Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous.
So we have time just for 2 more questions. So the first one will be from Ilana Martin. You mentioned at the beginning how entrepreneurship requires a change of a DNA. What is the main thing that needs to be in place for this to actually happen? Any tips? I am specifically thinking about places where there is a resistance to change.
This is a wonderful question, Ilana. Thank you. And I'm happy to continue this conversation later. That's exactly what I do in Japan. Japanese culture celebrates hierarchy, harmony, tradition, and obedience. You can't think of more opposite values to disruption and change, right? Hierarchy, harmony, tradition, and obedience. And what we try to do there in order to change their DNA or in order to train them or expose them we teach them to make mistakes. We take students and show them that mistakes, tiny little mistakes. We do a little project in University of Osaka in which we ask them, if you could change something in university, what would you do? And they say, we serve more dishes at the cafeteria. We say, fantastic. Let's start with that. Changing the color of one of the walls. Using one of the gardens for squash or whatever, right? The importance of risk-taking, failure, and the ability to make mistakes and move on. That's the first thing to do. That's what I do in Japan. That's what I did in Germany. I started teaching. NYU started just before Corona to teach a diploma of entrepreneurship to high school students in Germany. And when I got there, someone told me the basic, the fundamental thing in the German soul, and it was said by a German, is yes, but. And we try to change it from yes, but to yes, and. Make tiny mistakes, learn how to do it, and move. And again, it's of course easier said than done. I don't know what you do, Ilana, but I want to see your face when one of your employees come and says, I made a horrendous mistake. Would it be okay for you to say, thank you, keep on doing that, you are forgiven, you help us with creativity? Again, we say that in innovation, it's not the what, but the how. And the how needs more, but yeah, risk is the key, and failure.
Thank you. We have more questions, and I apologize that we can't answer everything. The last question is a quite personal question for you, Nir. How does the current COVID-19 crisis impact you personally?
Oh, in so many ways. First of all, 2 weeks ago I had a long hair and a beard, and now because I couldn't wait for the hairdresser to open, I shaved everything. I think I haven't been at home for so long in ages. I came back from Germany on March 1st. Then I was home quarantined, because all the people coming back from France, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and Spain were quarantined. Then I set myself free, and then the whole country went into lockdown. So now we slowly start to feel independence. By the way, yesterday was Israel's Independence Day. I start to go out and celebrate my own independence slowly but surely. I lost 5 different projects. I was supposed to teach in Japan for 2 weeks, gone. Run an entrepreneurship competition in Hartford, Connecticut, gone. Do lectures in Washington University, St. Louis, gone. Consult with a business in New Jersey, gone. It forced me to do more and more online stuff. It forced me now NYU together with the Israeli employment service is creating a little springboard for unemployed people to use entrepreneurship in order to change their lives. I'm writing a book and doing a podcast about innovation in times of crisis. And the last but not least change, I learned how to cook. I spend more and more time at home. And I realized I might as well experiment with all these funny things called cauliflowers and cabbages and zucchinis, and it actually works. I fail fast, and I hope I learn faster. And all of you, next time in Tel Aviv, come and taste my Corona cuisine or the fruits of my Corona creativity. And again, the really last change that it created, I'm doing Zooms with people like yourself. I no longer have to be in Melbourne in order to, not to see you, but to have a conversation with you. And I am grateful.
Well, thank you very much, Nir. That was an incredible speech and presentation, and we really, really would like to hear more of you. So thank you everyone for joining us. Stay in touch, where we'll have more events like this. We will send you tomorrow an email with Nir's details, and if you want to have the recording of this presentation, it will be available. Thank you very much, everyone, and we hope you're safe and healthy. Good night.
Thank you, Idan. Take care.
Thank you, Nir.